Welcome to the Beyond Bound Coach and AD Professional Development Series, a weekly online professional development for athletic administrators and coaches. Join us as 6 former ADs now employed by Bound and with over 100 years of combined experience discuss topics important and beneficial to ADs and coaches. Join us on this journey of professional growth. We're here to help you take your coaching and athletic administration to the next level and beyond.
All right, guys, we're going to dig into our first Beyond Bound professional development series. This is designed for ADs and coaches. Obviously, all the people on this call are coaches. They're educators. They're athletic directors. And so just briefly want to talk a little bit about what is Beyond Bound and why are we doing this? Well, we truly feel it's a unique professional development series designed for coaches, designed for ADs. Why is it unique? Because we understand how busy you are. We want this to be short, to the point, but something that you can take with you and think through and implement on your own school district or wherever you're at. We think it's a platform where ADs, coaches, educators share their experience to help others excel. We pick topics that matter to us as ADs and coaches, but we want to keep in mind how busy everyone is. And lastly, we think it's a community of peers who understand the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis. So all the gentlemen you see here, all of us have been through the fire, have been ADs for at least 15 years, have been coaches for many, many years. We understand where you're at, and we also understand you want people in your organization to keep getting better, to keep improving. So just brief introduction of myself. My name's Brian. I've been an athletic director for 15 years. I was in public education for 20 years, coached football for 11 years, basketball for 7. I'm still a head track coach. I'm an evaluator instructor for an evaluators course here in the state of Iowa. So just a little bit briefly about my background. And what I currently am doing and what I was doing. So today's Beyond Bound topic, it comes from Brian Kight. Brian Kight put out a blog post. It's been since 2020 when I saw that blog post, and it stuck with me. I shared it with all my coaches at that time. And it was talking about the championship process. So all of us as coaches and all of us as ADs, wins and losses do come up in our mind. So this idea of championship process is interesting. But I think the second line there is if you're going to compete well. In other words, if you're going to do something, do it well. It was a super interesting post that my coaches and myself had many conversations about after I shared it with them. And in this blog post, he shares his 5 maxims to sharpen that competitive edge. And as an AD and or a coach, we have to be honest with ourselves about these 5 maxims. And if we really want to push our staff, we really want to push ourselves to improve. So with today's topic, let's get better together. So to start those 5 maxims off, here we go. Number 1, his first maxim was train at the level you intend to perform at. And I pulled some stuff from Michael Jordan's video from The Last Dance. I'm sure some of you have seen that. I love that video. I'm not going to tell my brother-in-law who's a basketball coach. He's a huge Michael Jordan fan, and I always try to get his goat by telling him Michael Jordan's not the greatest ever, but watching that Last Dance, he truly was impressive to listen about. He talks about how he makes practices like games. And the one quote I pulled from that is how that work eliminates fear, right? He wasn't talking about winning the next game. He was talking about working in a way that eliminates fear when he gets into that game. And I think that's huge. So train at the level you intend to perform. 2, find pleasure in the pain of uncomfortable work. Okay, so I share and in the link that we're going to have with this video, I'll share David Goggins, a video from him. He's an ultra marathoner. He's a Navy SEAL. He has some strong language, but he also is very, very impressive with his mindset of just discipline and this idea of being uncomfortable. And I think a lot of coaches get that really, really confused. Uncomfortable means I got to run my kids or I got to punish them, or that's not what it is. It means doing hard things. That's it. Hard things for some of us coaches, for some of us ADs, is confronting people. I mean, that for some people, that's a hard thing. And so we need to find pleasure in uncomfortable work. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. Nobody successful has not been able to do that. Number 3, appreciate and aspire for better opponents. I love this one. I think everybody needs to understand when you're facing an opponent, we have to stop in educational athletics in particular, looking at everybody like they're the enemy. They're not the enemy. That's who's making us better. Okay, so we need to appreciate and aspire for better opponents. I talk to my coaches. I used to talk to them a lot about let's not complain. Let's not blame who the state gives us, who the quality of the opponent is. Let's use that. Let's see where we're at. Let's try and understand it. And I guarantee you, even if that game is totally lopsided, it's much closer than you think. Okay, we're talking about high school athletes here. It's much closer than you think. And so to improve, we have to want to compete against the best. And so I shared a link with Dr. Alex Diaz talking about playing the best. Find the best to see who you are. And that's the quote I took from that. Find the best to see who you actually are. Okay, last 2 here. Number 4, probably my favorite one, obsess over the few simple disciplines that give an advantage. Okay, and I think number 4 truly is the one area where you can distinguish yourself from the best of the best. If you're trying to get to that next level, that last 10% climb is where you can get that. It's obsessing over the little things. The difference between winning and losing is way closer than we all think. I know everybody says, the team you cheer for on Saturday or Sunday, they killed the other team by 50 points. That's easy. Next time we play them, it's going to be, and it's not. You see them go play in the postseason or something like that, and the game is much closer because the difference is very, very close. It's razor thin. And last one, move on from the last moment. Doesn't matter what the last moment was. You won, you lost, you didn't play well, you did play well. All of those types of things. Move on from the last moment. Whether successful or not, pay attention to this moment. All right. And that was always important for me to understand after a good season. I hope that, I coached 20 years in track, and some of those years ended, we had a good season. And I thought, we've done it. We've got there. We're to the point. That's not how this works. Okay. And the process to get there was the important part. And that's what you have to stay true to. So with those 5 maxims, I just kind of sat back and thought about 3 things. Okay. 3 things that I think all ADs, all coaches need to consider when thinking those 5 maxims. Number 1, be honest. As an AD, as a coach, be honest. Do you find yourself avoiding the hard? Okay, avoiding the things that are uncomfortable. If you do, you need to be honest with yourself and understand what you can do to get better at that. Do you blame, or do you find your coaches or your people that you work with blaming and complaining about opponents, about officials, and if this would have happened, then that would have happened? Because if you do, you're nowhere near those 5 maxims. You have to cut loose on that stuff. Number 2, details matter. We just talked about it. But I think the key here is what you allow is who you are. Okay? That doesn't mean that as a coach, your kids aren't going to screw up. As an AD, your coaches they're going to screw up. But what we allow and how we handle those situations is who you are as a culture, as an organization. If you let small things go, it won't be long before that's who your culture is. And then number 3, we're talking about the championship process. I just think this is so interesting. Anybody who's been coaching for a long time, anybody who's been in activities or an athletic director for a long time understands it is ultimately all about the process of getting there. So stop getting caught up in wins and losses. That is 100% outside your control. You have no control over the athletes on the other team. Okay. And what I mean by that is in high school athletics, they could have 5 Power 5 Division I athletes on the other side of the field. There's nothing you can do about that. Control you, control the process, and I guarantee you're going to be happier with the results. So, discussion, thoughts from the ADs in the crowd here. What are you guys thinking?
Well, I love the fact that they talk a little bit about, sorry, Aaron. I love the fact they talk about just the effort and the work that goes into it, the grind that goes in to what they do and how important that is. I can honestly tell you, and I know you guys made fun of me I probably got this much talent, but I just try to work as hard as I possibly can to be good. And it's only because of that time that you put in that makes most people great. There's very few people that have that 1% talent that can be a Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But everybody, as Goggins said, Brian, I love the way you brought that up. And he is rough around the edges, but he's straight to the point. Yeah. And he's so right in what he says. It's the effort you put in. Whenever you feel like you're going to break, you can go more.
Yeah. Well, Scott, I think you're right. I talked about for some people, because that was hard for me. I was not a confrontational guy, and I never enjoyed that, but I had to take it head on. And so the hard for me wasn't necessarily the work all the time, but it was maybe the uncomfortable conversation. And what Scott's talking about, the uncomfortable for a lot of people is time or it's effort, So I think that being uncomfortable, there's a lot of different ways that we need to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Aaron, you had something you wanted to throw in there.
Yeah, you've been around me, I could talk a while. You're hitting like all my sweet spots here in this talk, Brian. Great job. 2 things I want to bring up. Number one, when you're talking about the training at the level you want to perform at, ADs or even head coaches at your level, I would encourage you when you're doing walkthroughs in practice, or AD or head coaches, get to your lower level practices, because that's really the culture your program is being set. And you're doing those walkthroughs and watching those practices, look at the level of training going on. As an AD, there's so many conversations I have with kids and parents who were disappointed with the season. It didn't go the way we wanted it to go. We didn't achieve the success and the level of in the postseason we wanted to get to. I walk through the practices and I don't see a high level of training going on. They want to be lazy and not work real hard in practice, and then all of a sudden when the lights come on Tuesday night volleyball or Friday night football or pick the sport, all of a sudden they're supposed to be great. They're supposed to be able to perform at this high pace, high level, high intensity, but that's not where they work. So check that out when you're doing walkthroughs. And on the number 3, appreciate and inspire for better opponents, I'll simply say this: check your ego at the door, because you can't do that if you're worried about the win-loss record. And you might, there's a lot of people out there win 75% of the games, but I want to look at who they played and who they became as a part of the process, like you said. But check your ego at the door.
Good. Yeah.
Along that same line, on that same point, very simple phrase we've all heard over and over again, but iron sharpens iron. And it's so true, so true, so true. You can't change that fact.
Yeah. I love watching the teams that everybody thinks is going to get beat up in a game, and I love those teams that draw that line in the sand and say, no, we're not. And they elevate their game based on who, and I get the turn on, turn off, but they've obviously practiced that way. They're ready for that moment. You can't win a game. You can't win an event without going 4 quarters, going the length of it. There's only so much luck and things like that it'll get you. So, Mark, you're dead on. Iron's going to sharpen iron. When we go see that better team, we want to raise our game.
I would just I would add, it's great presentation, Aaron or Brian. The road to success hasn't changed in 100+ years. It's the same, and I think it's gotten more visual. I mean, we see more success on TV, social media. We see all that, but when you dig down into it, it hasn't changed at all. And one of the greatest basketball coaches that ever lived passed away yesterday, and his motto was, make practice harder than the game, and he did. Now, we won't sit here and argue about how he did it, verbally, but he made practices harder than the game. And so I think that's part of being uncomfortable, and the coach has to be able to make his players uncomfortable and then love them afterwards and love them during. You always got to have that love component as well. And he did love his people. And if you saw Steve Alford talk yesterday, he's crying, and he was as tough on Steve Alford as anybody, but he knew he loved him. And we've all had coaches like that too. And I think if you're a young coach listening to this, or a young AD, I wish I would have applied and done this more the first half of my career than I did more the second half, because you just got a little bit older, and it's hard when you're young, but you still have to learn to do that and be uncomfortable doing it. But don't go for the glitter, go for the grind.
Right.
I'd like to piggyback just on what Aaron was talking about, and we mentioned with appreciating your opponent. When they play well, if you can't look at that and appreciate what they've done, because the other team's trying too, they're working their butts off in practice. Take a look. What did they do that got them past my team? Did they work harder? Did they execute better? What do I have to do to get better? But appreciate your opponent. They're, like you said, Brian, they're not the enemy.
Yeah.
They're just kids and coaches out there working hard and trying to do their best. So if we can't learn from our failures, what are we really doing? And what are we really teaching our kids to do later in life? Learn from our mistakes, learn from our failures, work harder, do better.
And I'll kind of wrap it up with this idea, because we want to keep everybody moving in their day. But Joe Ehrman, many of you have read his books. Joe Ehrman, the coach on the East Coast, and I'm going to butcher this story, but once upon a day I was reading one of his books talking about competing, and when he learned, he was in the NFL when he learned that the guy across from him was the guy making him better. He wasn't the enemy. He was the guy making him better. And I cannot remember the names of who it was he played, but Joe Ehrman's brother had passed away that summer. And in a early season NFL game, whoever they're playing, the guy across from him was drafted one spot ahead of him. And Joe Ehrman said that whole week, every time we played him, I practiced longer and harder, and I stayed after practice. And I just hated this guy. I wanted to kill him. And he goes, first play of the game, this guy destroys me, absolutely levels me, lays me flat on my back, comes over and picks me up. And as he's picking me up, he kind of gives me a little hug and says, hey, I'm really sorry to hear about your brother. He's a great guy just like you. And he goes, at that instant, I thought about all the extra work I did to try and prepare to be better because of that one guy. And I saw it as an enemy. And it actually, at the end of it, that's one of my friends. And so that right there, that story was very, very powerful for me to understand that idea of appreciating competition, wanting to go against the best, but it doesn't mean you're eternal enemies. Those guys are the ones making us better. So anybody got anything else to throw into the group chat here? Otherwise we can, Scott, we can shut her down if not. All right. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for hopping on.